Okay, hi everyone. Come in and grab a seat. My name's Alex Stokes, and for those of you who probably don't know me, I've been in the software industry for about 17 years, so getting pretty old now, and for about 15 or 16 of those I've been involved in large agile adoptions, I guess, and I've done every role from developer to all the way up to heads of IT departments or heads of IT software delivery. And I was the person speaking very quickly at the lightning talk this morning. My talk today is on the horrors of scaling. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what motivates us to scale and why we decide that we need to scale, so businesses, organisations. Then I'm going to talk with maths and graphs about why it can be horrifying sometimes. And then I'm going to talk about some real case studies about scaling that I was involved in. So why do we want to scale? So is it human nature, and does it start in sand pits and stacking blocks of towers, that when we build something we just want it to get bigger and bigger? Is it greed? So are we intrinsically motivated to make more and more money once we start making it? Or are our decisions to scale things literally often based on bad maths? So I'm going to give you a little exercise here. So who in the audience would like to be an entrepreneur? Anyone? Anyone? So, okay, it's all right. It's just a little scenario I'm going to ask you. So, what would you do? Huh?
Depends on how active I have to be.
No, it's only a hand-raising thing.
Oh,
Okay, so I'm going to make you all entrepreneurs. I'm going to give you a business which is a business where you make a software application. So you guys have been involved in making a software application. You've been doing it for about a year. It's an application where you can order your coffee at your favourite coffee store, a little boutique coffee store, and when you arrive, your coffee's there waiting for you. So there are 4 people in your organisation. It's taking you about a year to get where you are, and you're adding like one boutique coffee station or coffee house every couple of months. So business is pretty good, and you can sustain it with those 4 people in your team. But then you spot an opportunity for a coffee branch or a coffee, what are they called? Franchise. They want your app, but they want it to scale to their whole franchise. They want it to be interoperable. Is that right? Between each franchise, and they also want it not just on iPhone, but they want it on Android, and they want it also, on desktop as well. So a lot more functionality. So show of hands of what option do you do? So do you decide to start a new business to take care of that franchise from scratch and duplicate the results of your first business, but effectively duplicate the costs of your first business? Or do you decide to leverage your current business knowledge of your current team and just try and grow that, so duplicate the results of that business without necessarily duplicating the costs? So we'll have a show of hands. So who would do option A as a software product entrepreneur? And okay, it depends is a good answer. It's the consultant's answer. And who would choose option B? Okay, interesting. So there were no right or wrong answers. I'm just interested in what you were going to say. So the question that we should be asking when we come to scale something, and we often don't ask, is what are we really asking to scale? So a lot of the time it's just scaling the number of initiatives that we have running at any one time, because more initiatives mean, more money-making gambles, and that equates to more people and more teams. And I've actually worked in organisations that are so big that they have people dedicated just to this. So these people just create business cases and try and get business cases approved and the funding approved so that initiatives can run, and their KPIs are on how many initiatives can they run. And I've actually seen people high-fiving when they've exceeded just getting things started without much regard to how deliverable or executable the thing is that they've been getting approval for. Sometimes we have the wisdom to ask, okay, well actually what we want to scale is the output of teams or multiple teams or our organisation, or we want to scale the amount of throughput that we're getting through the teams. But how often do we actually ask about scaling individual team performance? So sadly, often when you're being asked to scale, you're not asked to make things better, you're just asking to make things bigger, and bigger isn't better, only better is better. So bigger numbers we find don't really stack up when it comes to scaling software delivery. And they don't stack up in kind of unexpected ways. So you might assume that I've got one team producing X, why can't I have 2 teams producing 2 times X? But when we take a close look at the numbers and software delivery, we find out why. So you might have seen this diagram. It's from the Lunar Tractor website. And it really illustrates the nature of communication when you're delivering software in terms of the social contracts or the communication contracts you have to make with each other. So the idea of communication contracts is I have to talk to you because I'm on a team building software with you, and in order to do that we need to get on the same page about something, so we have a communication contract. So a team of 3 has 3 communication contracts to keep everyone on that team on the same page. It rapidly starts to scale when you get to a team of 5, and then when you get to a team of 10 you have more than 40 contracts involved. So it's a fascinating diagram because it shows how kind of messy and complicated it gets as teams just get even a little bit bigger. So because I'm fascinated by it, I wanted to take it and understand it and really own it and apply it to some bigger numbers and find out what it might tell us. So I got on Excel and did a little bit of maths because Excel was my tool of choice, and worked out that the equation for figuring out how many communication contracts are between people on teams equates to the number of the team minus 1 plus that number minus 1 plus that number minus 1 until you run out of numbers. So for a 3-person team it equals 3. For a 5-person team, so 5 minus 1 is 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10. So who would like to do the mental arithmetic and tell me how many communication contracts are in a 10-person team? Who said? 55. Did anyone get it right? 45 is the answer. So who wants to do the mental arithmetic and tell me how many communication contracts will be involved in a 100-person team? Anyone want to shout out their guess? Final number would be? So the answer's shocking. It's 4,950, and I know that because I did it in Excel, and it took me a long time, but that was my tool of choice. So we find that, in actual fact, adding 1 person to a team-sized team adds team-sized number of contracts to that team. So adding 1 person to a 3-person team adds 3 more contracts to that team. But adding 1 person only to a 100-person team adds 100 more communication contracts to that team. So here's a graph that shows it in a scary way. So no way is communication amongst people in teams linear, and that's why it's so hard to scale things like software delivery beyond a team size of a small team, and that's why we believe in pizza-sized team sizes so much, because the small team can communicate so much more effectively. So then I started thinking, okay, well, that's not linear, so what happens to the productivity of teams as they grow? So the proportion of time spent in communication, so I made a few assumptions. I assumed people worked an 8-hour day, and I assumed that if I was working on a team with you building software, that I would have to spend roughly 10 minutes a day with you just getting on the same page about a topic. So does that sound reasonable? I spend 10 minutes with you, we're on the same page now? So a 3-person team has to spend 2% of their time in that communication, very reasonable. I can do a lot of work in the rest of my time. 5-person team spends 4% of their time, and so on. 10-person team, 10% of the time, ooh, getting up there, now that's kind of eating into my day. 100-person team, 103% of their time? What? That doesn't make sense, does it? So naturally we would think, okay, well these massive teams, they must just be really, really slow at communicating and things must take a long time, and yes they do, but actually something worse happens. So communication starts to fracture and halt because I couldn't possibly talk to 100 people in a day. Cells of communication form because I can't speak to 100 people, so I'm going to just talk to the people who are like physically near me in my team or actually agree with me, because I'm only talking to people whose opinions I agree with. Siloed thinking starts to form in those teams, and then because we have siloed thinking in separate teams, we can often get competition between 2 teams where teams talking to the opinions that they believe very strongly every day and so in other teams, and the worst case scenario in software, that equals people start building the same thing but on different teams. So then we have opposing agendas because I really want to build my thing my way and I want to push it, and so does the other team. So now we need politics. So we need politics now to influence other people, and politics is a big waste of time, as you all know. But worst of all, we're no longer serving the main goal, we're no longer serving aligned goals, and then we end up building train tracks that don't meet like that. So we end up building wrong thing, wrong stuff. So does that mean that we should never scale software delivery? So my consultant's answer, it depends. So I think saying no to a business that wants to rapidly scale their business, I want to make more coffee, I want to make, I want to grow a business of my coffee entrepreneurship, isn't good enough, because we know the desire to scale is there, and we can't multiply everything in a linear fashion. So how can we help our businesses scale? So I'm going to take you through a few case studies, and these are places that I worked. and I don't work there anymore, so I can say what I like about them, which is great. So Insurance Line was a company I joined in 2007, and the software itself couldn't scale. So the core selling platform couldn't scale beyond 7 users. How do we know that? Because we had 7 people in the QA department, and when they all jumped on at the same time and tested it, it would grind to a halt. They had major distrust of IT from the business, so promises had been made and broken, and they really didn't trust IT that could deliver for them anymore. They had an amazing sales machine, and they knew they could sell more products, and they knew they could beef up their capacity in sales really well, so they wanted to do more. They also had amazing cultural values. So the company had very strong cultural values back in 2007 and hired for culture back then, which I think was great, and it was filtered all the way through their organisation. They didn't have software vendors, which was a bit of a bonus, because they believed that building their core platform themselves as a bespoke piece of software gave them a competitive advantage. So we didn't have to kind of wrestle with vendors, so that was good. And we had about 45 people that we wanted to scale to, which was about double what they had in the team. So when I think about the success factors, well, there were many, but the ones that stand out for me the most were their drive to hire for cultural fit in that organisation. And that manifested as we couldn't hire anyone in IT if they didn't pass the business check. So every person that you hired in IT had to meet about 3 business people and get the nod from business people before we could hire them. And that was kind of frustrating on one hand, but it was also great on the other hand, because not only did we know that they would fit in and they were the kind of people we wanted to hire, but the business was really then bought in that person, and then they would have real trust and faith in whatever that person did. We did everything in a kind of try before you buy way. So we did our first Agile project in a pilot, and we were very careful about saying, this is a pilot, we will test the results, we'll examine the results. If we get good results, we'll try and do it elsewhere. And that meant the business had to give us a green tick before we moved on. And in fact, what we did was kind of pull our scaling of Agile teams from the business. So when the business said, we love what that team's doing, it's getting great results, I want that on my initiative, that's when we scaled the team. Because if you try and scale off bad results, you'll probably do that really effectively as well. And ultimately, it was a major leap of faith from the business. So they had tried an Agile transformation before and failed, so it was a very difficult environment to walk into and say, hey, let's have Agile projects. But with doing this kind of pull it from the business, get the business bought in, it was quite successful, and they made that leap of faith, and they're still doing fantastic now. So my next case study is AIA. When I walked in to AIA, the thing that really struck me was that they felt like they had a real problem with their IT, and that the people were wrong and the people were bad.
What's AIA?
Australia, I can't remember what it stands for anymore, but it's an insurance company, another insurance company. So American Insurance Associates, but anyway, just AIA now. They had bad legacy systems, so a lot of COBOL, 20-year-old systems. They had a lot of heavy PMO and governance, and it was very slow and costly to deliver their projects. And they had heavy PMO and governance because of IT failures of the past, I think. They had a lot of single point failures in IT, so single guys that could fix things, and those people are really hard to scale. They had distributed delivery teams between Melbourne and China. And we had bad vendor. So we had a vendor that had pretty much run rampant through the organisation for about 3 years, interacting directly with the business, and not that they were evil people, but they were just encouraging the business to spend a lot of money, and they had caused a few problems. And about 90 people in our software delivery. So how do we scale? So my kind of celebration, people aren't like throwing people off a cliff. It's actually celebrating and having fun with people. So first of all, we had to kind of do a bit of a cultural revamp, because they really did feel like they'd been picked on, I guess, throughout the years. And I really felt like I had to change the mindset that there was something wrong with the people. I've been through a few Agile transformations, and I know that in some cases people do think they have to shove a lot of people out the way and hire new people that think like them for that, but I don't feel that's the case. I think that a lot of the time you just need a few key people and a few new skills, and that generally there's nothing wrong with the people that are in your IT department. So we did a real cultural revamp and focused on showing the strengths and the talents of the people. We decided to be partners with the vendor, so we really swallowed our pride and decided that we wanted to use the vendor on an Agile project and really kind of showcase that. And to do it, beating up the vendor wasn't going to help anyone, so it meant that we had to kind of trust the vendor and kind of build a good relationship with the vendor, because you can't do an Agile project with a vendor without trust. you need to both be on the same page. Contracts don't work. And that just ask was, we did a pilot agile project, again, trying to show a good result and then pull it through for the rest of the organisation. And then when we showed a good pilot result, so this team had done 11 small enhancements in 1 year and they scaled it to doing 30 in a 6-month period, help from SourceWorks actually, and Agile Transformation. And we said, well, based on that good result, we want to eat into your project portfolio because we know that there's a lot of things in there that are just enhancements and small changes, and we asked for as much as they would give us to use as agile work streams and long-running teams. So, you know, I don't know if it was a 20 million portfolio that had $100,000 for enhancements, we said, oh, we want to encroach into your portfolio about 5 million and carve out all those things that you would call small projects, and we'll put them into long-running agile work streams, and that really worked. They didn't like it at first and said, oh, we'll have to have a project manager on every one of those. And we said, well, no, we've proved it with one stream, we don't need a project manager, we can do it with those people in IT, works just fine. And so we created 4 agile work streams, and they're still up and running today. We're going for time. So my last case study is the DDC, the Digital Delivery Centre in Australia Post. So a really fascinating study into a giant organisation. So new department, massive appetite for digital. So why do they want to scale? Because they essentially want to save what is an increasingly irrelevant business and turn it into a digital business. Of course, there's 32,000 people in Australia Post, so of course there's a PMO and of course there's a lot of governance. There was a desire to prove agile, no doubt, in Australia Post. So, you know, people saying, well, Telstra's got agile, Combank's got agile, why can't we have agile? So there was definitely a desire to do agile in Australia Post. Very slow hiring processes because there's slow processes everywhere in big companies, and we shouldn't be surprised about that. New leadership team formed in order to implement digital in Australia Post, and the need to grow from about 20 people that were supporting, maintaining and building digital assets just as, you know, short-lived tactical projects to about 120 in the DDC. So what do we do? So what do you do when you're at a... Hi.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say heavy PMO governance,
yeah.
Can you describe what you're seeing to make it heavy as opposed to enabling scalability? I suppose, I mean, traditional methodologies in terms of governance. So, you know, a mandatory phased approach. So initiate, discover, build, test, explode. Well, you know, based on a traditional development methodology, a very project-oriented approach. So come up with an idea, get the funding, scale up a big team, build it, and then scale the team right down and transition to BAU. Heaviness just goes with big organisations in terms of mandated documents and templates. I think it's like 63 mandated templates and documents and things like that. There's a project manager from Post that he can nodding away. Yeah. Would you say it was heavy, Colin?
Very heavy.
Yeah.
And they're not rated, these documents that you produce.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a blog post on that called business requirements documents are just no good. Okay. So we knew hi.
So I just have a question to follow on from that.
Yeah.
How do you get like senior management out of the headspace that's related to that high governance, like around them wanting specific timeframes and Gantt charts, specific budgets to work to it?
Yeah, so there's a few things you could do. One is, you know, if you've got enough people who want to scale a different process, that's great. Something like SAFE will help you do that. If you're just, you know, the lonely voice and it's new, but people kind of want to try something, then I think it's great to say we're a pilot and we're different. And because we're a pilot and we're different, we want exemption. And the people who had done Agile, and there's lots of Agile happening at Post before, you know, Scaled Agile came along, we're pretty good at, you know, getting exemptions. Oh, we're not going to do requirements documents. This is how we're going to do our requirements. We're going to do stories. This is how we're going to manage them. So it's extra work.
It's more at the challenge that we're having is more like they want a business case and they want a specific budget on it and they want a time frame.
Yeah. So that's another big topic. So let's talk. Come and see me in the break for other people. Okay, so yes, we're building a big digital team and we know we want to scale Agile and there's a massive appetite to scale. What do we do as a new leadership team? We do what everyone does at big organisations. You have an off-site. So we went to the beach But we didn't go to that beach. We went to Sorrento, it was overcast, but it was still nice. And we felt that it was very important as a leadership team that we all agreed on the values and the principles that we were going to have as a leadership team and that we would stick to them. Because we were sort of starting to scale and we were sort of getting results, but we didn't really have a heart or a soul in the department. So we really invested time in agreeing as a team who didn't know each other. So this leadership team didn't know each other. So a lot of it was just about get to know you, find out what we have in common. Oh yes, that's good. We've got some commonality and some ground to agree on. But that was a really, really important foundation. We stuck to that really strongly throughout our scaling. And you know, if we lost our way sometimes because we're getting pressure to do things very quickly, we try and revert back to, well, hang on, what are we here for and what are you trying to do? And I think that's really, really important because when you're scaling, your business is very impatient and wants you to rush it, but you've got to do it well because, like I said, if you scale for failure, you can do that quite easily as well. And we used frameworks, so we used things like SAFE, which do work in big organisations. And we also looked at Spotify, which if you're looking at starting Agile at scale or, you know, multiple Agile teams, even small, even Agile in the small, I would definitely recommend looking into Spotify because they have some really great principles and values that we tried to stick to from the start. So when I look at all of those 3 case studies and scaling and the dilemma of scaling, and I think what's at the heart of it and what the art of it is really to build cells. So these are bronchial cells, human bronchial cells. But the great thing about the metaphor of cells is that cells have everything inside them that they need to operate and function and even to specialise. So I think that if you can create that environment for your teams, cells have things that come and go and structures around them, but if you can create that kind of self-sufficiency inside a team, that they have everything they need to deliver, that's how you can get successful scaling. So what have we learned today? So we've learned that organisations desire scale, but what are they trying to scale? Is it number of initiatives? Is it just number of people? Is it, you know, how much stuff they're putting out, or is it actually good results? Ask that question. We've found out the maths doesn't stack up for large teams to be effective. We've also found some success factors for when you have to scale. So staying faithful to your principles, people and culture, very important. Using scaling techniques that we know work, like frameworks and looking at other organisations. Impressing your customer first before scaling. So really asking, what are you seeing that you like about this team? And really kind of making them pull that scale from you. Not just saying, we need to get more initiatives because we need to get more initiatives. Saying, I want that team performance to be working on my thing now. And creating that cell idea, so the self-sufficiency of teams, I think, helps you scale. So that's scaling. And the horrors of scaling, which aren't so horrible. Any questions?
Yeah, I was really interested to see that Spotify diagram there.
Yeah, it's very tiny, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's very tiny, but
I can flick back to it.
What's interesting about that model is that it does scale nicely, but traditionally with Spotify they don't have the Scrum Master Iteration Manager associated with each of those squads. So how have you adapted that at Post?
So we do have iteration, they do have iteration managers in the team that I was in at Post, most definitely. And we often have double iteration manager and project manager. So at Post in the DDC, they have this concept of long-lived teams. And they kind of pull different initiatives through them, and those initiatives might come with a project manager, and so a team might be facing off to several project managers at once. Not really common, but sometimes we had several projects going through teams at once. So yes, we definitely needed a lead role. And when I also think about Spotify scaling, I think that they started with small agile teams and grew that model. So their cell reproduction almost was really like cell reproduction. It's almost like, let's have another one of those here. With Post, we tried to kind of build a dome inside the organisation and say, we want to be different. You know, we want to do things differently. We're going to be different. So
in a more constructive way, as opposed to Spotify, that kind of the little
very organic. Correct. Yeah. And I think what my opinion is, if you go inside a Post or a NAB or anything like that, it's going to be more difficult, and you'll need sort of a bit more kind of leadership, lead type roles. I've just come from Tony Fifle's excellent talk about protecting teams, and I think that those large enterprise organisations, you do need to do that a little bit more. Yeah.
At the offsite you had, was there an IT leadership team and a business leadership team, or was
it was just IT, and this is the sad thing about organisations like big enterprise organisations, sometimes that you don't have enough contact with your business, and we definitely suffered from that. But it was just the leadership team of the DDC, so it was about 7 people, and we ran it over 2 days. We had iterations, we had topics we wanted to cover, like what culture do we want, what values are we going to have, how will we scale, what are the operational things that concern us, heaps and heaps of topics, but mostly it was get to know you and agree on how we're going to lead and build this digital team.
Did you have to get buy-in from the business side of the product side? Or
constant buy-in. Every day was another bit of sale, to be honest. And that is where SAFE can help you, because it has this whole, body of knowledge that says this can make sense to the enterprise. You don't have to understand about points or MVP and stuff like that. We can actually translate it to very, very busy business people that you can get value out of this model, because sometimes we lose, our corporate brothers and sisters in the business with our kind of talk about, it's very about engineering practice based, I suppose.
So why didn't you include business leadership in that?
Don't know. It's a good idea. Actually, we did on our second offsite that Andy was at as well over there, I see. We digested a lot of feedback. So we went to the business. I mean, when you say business sponsorship, we would have been facing off to maybe 20 sponsors of different projects. Yeah. So we went to them and said, give us feedback on what we're doing, and digested that into our kind of second offsite.
It's more diffuse the business leadership.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you very much for your time and attention.